Okay, I'm going to tell my own personal story about, to give an example of how devotees in the late 1960s were actually more advanced, the same devotees, with many of them, than they were in 1975. In the summer of 1970, I got one of the very first Krishna books, and most likely it was the very first Krishna book to be distributed. That is a long story all on its own, and I made a 1.5+ hour video of that story. I made it in the summer of 2020, which marked 50 years since the time I got that Krishna book. If you want, or when you have time, you can click on that link, or then you can save it for later and watch it later. When I got that Krishna book, I was really blown over by all the full color paintings. I had long been searching for a book that would describe what God looked like and what his activities were in the spiritual kingdom. And this book not only gave such descriptions in detail, but it contained what Srila Prabhupada called windows to the spiritual world. These were the full color paintings depicting Krishna and his pastimes. Out of all these paintings, I later found out that most of the ones that I liked the best were painted by the one and same artist. Her name was Mother Devahuti Devi Dasi. Yeah, I'm slipping this in here. This is from my video that I found, and it was taken in Los Angeles. And it's the only pictures that I could find of Devahuti. I just came across it, and I thought, oh, I'll just put it up. This is Devahuti Devi Dasi. And it's only like 1 second, 2 seconds in the video. But like I said, in 1974, when she became my art guru, she taught me some things. So anyway, she was Mataji. I mean, not Mataji, she was Grand Mataji. I was 23, and this is, how old she was at the time. I'm not good at judging age. I don't want to, maybe she was in her 50s, but I would think she was in her 60s at the time. All gray hair and all. But those are the only pictures that I readily can find of her. I've searched the internet. And I just happened to have had this video a long time ago. I downloaded it, so. And then I saw she was on there just a few seconds. Her name was Mother Devahuti Devi Dasi. She had painted the Rasa dance. Now, let me just explain about the Rasa dance, the painting in the Krishna book. I think it's a fault of the color separations. The colors don't pop. They don't, and I've popped them a little bit on, with a photo editor, but so that looked more like the original painting. But the paintings in the Krishna book just didn't pop, but I love that painting. I was blown away. It was in Srila Prabhupada's room in Los Angeles, where that painting hangs above his bed in his room, his personal quarters in Los Angeles. And when I first saw the actual painting, I was like, oh, wow. And no wonder Prabhupada hung it above his bed in his room. The other paintings that I really liked, and that was painted by Devahuti, Mother Devahuti Devi Dasi, was Krishna stealing the clothes of the gopis, the Makan Chorta, the butter thief, Krishna entering Mathura and giving the flower garland by the Walla. When I got the Krishna book, I also got, at the same time at the library, the Nectar of Devotion and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, all at the same time. And, you'll have to click on that story of that video for all the details. But another painting I really liked was on the cover of the original Nectar of Devotion, Radha Krishna on the swing. That was also painted by Devahuti Devi Dasi. It was a copy of she made a copy of the original painting that was done in the 1920s or 30s by, I think his name was Banerjee. And Srila Prabhupada very much liked that Banerjee's paintings, and it was one of his favorites when Srila Prabhupada was a young man. I had seen Indian prints before. Indian prints like the Krishna stealing the gopi, the milk, the Makan Chorta. But the paintings, and I'd seen the Indian prints before, but the paintings in Srila Prabhupada's books, they were just different. I could feel real spiritual potency, real spiritual purity, real energy coming from just seeing the prints of those paintings in the Krishna book. They were on the spiritual platform. I could feel that. And there was so much energy coming from those paintings that I considered the artists who painted those paintings to be very spiritually advanced souls. So in 1970, when I got that Krishna book, I prayed to Krishna that someday he would allow me to meet the artist who painted those paintings. However, when I got the books back in 1970, I didn't know about temples. It took me 3 years to finally join ISKCON. Those 3 years are not explained in that video about how I got the Krishna book, but I will make another video on how I came to Krishna consciousness and what happened in those 3 years. When I do, I'll complete it. And when I get it completed, I'll put a link up here for that as well. But I joined the temple in 1973. Some months later, I saw a letter Srila Prabhupada had requested artists to come to Mayapur to help him, making the temple there and making the temple project in Mayapur Dham. Art was a hobby of mine before I became a devotee. So I asked Karander, my GBC at the time, if I could go to India. I wanted to go to India to help with the art. He tried to talk me out of it, but I insisted to go. So he and Jayatirtha, who was my temple president and then a few months later became the GBC in Los Angeles, decided I would have to earn my ticket to go by working at the BBT warehouse, shipping out orders for 6 months, and then they would send me. This was before the BBT artist had moved to LA. The BBT artists at the time were in New York at the ISKCON Press in New York. But since I had made it known that I wanted to do artwork, a devotee in Los Angeles who was in charge of the new LA art department, Naranarayan Prabhu, engaged me in one art project. I'll explain it quickly, but for more details on this, I'll make another video about this because it is a story I tell about Prabhupada and experience I had. But Prabhupada was coming to the LA temple, and he had his garden he would go out and have darshans in his garden, give darshans, and there was the seat, they were redoing it. And a devotee was making a little asan for it out in this garden, but he hadn't completed it yet. So they made this white box, just 4 foot, 3 by 4 foot or something, and a couple foot high, and painted it all white. And Narayana came up to me and said, "You want to be an artist? Here, paint something artistic on it." And he said, "Here's your project." And he said, "But Prabhupada's coming. It has to be done quickly." So I had to go and buy acrylic paints so they dry instantly. And what to paint anyway, I came up and I knew you couldn't paint the Hare Krishna mantra. I knew I couldn't paint Krishna. Prabhupada wouldn't sit on top of Krishna. He won't sit on top of his holy name. That's Krishna. So what am I going to paint? And I don't know why I came up with a cow. And I painted a cow with flowers around. And on the top of it, I painted a mandal of a lotus. Not an actual look like a lotus, but a mandal. And I had gotten that from books that I had gotten in the library before I became a devotee. So I knew it was a bona fide design, but I painted it on there. But Narayan, when I was done with it, Narayan looked at the top of it and he said, "What is that?" I said, "It's a lotus flower." "That is no lotus flower." And I said, "Well, it's not an actual lotus flower. It's a lotus mandal." And he said, "Oh, can't have Prabhupada see that." So he told a devotee, "Go get something, cover this." And the devotee ran to his apartment and brought a Islam prayer rug that he had on his wall, and they put that on top. And so Prabhupada came out in the garden, and I didn't get to go to the garden. But I was a new devotee, so Prabhupada came out to the garden and he looked at the cow and he was smiling. Narayan told me the story later. He was smiling at it and kept looking at it, and then he went to sit down. Just before he sat down, he lifted up the blanket to see what was underneath the prayer rug. And Narayan was going, "Oh no, Prabhupada, what's he going to say? He's not going to, what is this?" and all that. And he said, Prabhupada looked at it and he smiled, put it down, and he got up sat down, and he lifted up his knee and he lifted up the rug again. He looked at it and he put it down. "Who has painted this?" And Narayana said, oh, he's new disciple, Srila Prabhupada, you just initiated him, Amayatma Das. And Prabhupada said, oh, tell him he has done very nicely. So after that meeting, then Narayan came running up to tell me what had happened. So I call that, receiving Prabhupada's mercy in his garden, receiving mercy in Prabhupada's garden. Even though I wasn't in the garden, I got his mercy. So, anyway, the very first New York BBT artist. So there was a devotee, I think she was initiated in Los Angeles. I'm not positive, but I think that's where I saw in the disciples list. So Devahudi Devi Dasi. So she had gone to New York with the ISKCON Press was there, and became an artist, and she did all the paintings for the Krishna book, and did the paintings that she had done for the Krishna book there in New York. But she had come back to Los Angeles, so she was one of the first New York BBT artists to come back to LA, or to come to LA. And the plan was that since the BBT was setting up in Los Angeles, that the BBT art department, the ISKCON Press art department, along with all the artists, would then move from New York to Los Angeles. So Narayan thought that rather than me going to India to do artwork in Mayapur, that I should stay in Los Angeles and train to start painting for the BBT and start painting for Srila Prabhupada's books. And since Devahudi was the first of the BBT artists to be there at the time, he asked her to spend some time with me and get me started, and training for the painting for the books. And Devahudi Devi Dasi wasn't just Mataji. She was more the age of my grandmother. As a brahmachari, I was very strict, and I didn't talk unnecessarily with women at the time. But Devahudi was different. Because of her age and being like grandmother, but mostly because she only spoke about Srila Prabhupada. And she just shared these wonderful nectarian stories with me. I felt very blessed to be in her association. So I asked her what paintings she had painted, and was so surprised to find out that she painted nearly all of my favorite paintings from the Krishna book and on the cover of the original Nectar Devotion. I had prayed to Krishna to gain the artist association who had painted those paintings, and Krishna answered those prayers. Several of her paintings hung in Srila Prabhupada's personal quarters at the time, in Los Angeles. And at the time, that painting from the cover of the Nectar Devotion was in Srila Prabhupada's sitting room. Srila Prabhupada also very much liked her paintings. As I was training to paint for the books, soon all the other BBT artists came from New York to LA, Jadharani, Parikshit, Murlidhar. So I wound up getting all their association. And later Bhardraj came, and I wound up joining him, under him, on the Fate Multimedia Museum project. In 1975, maybe late 1974, but I'm sure it was in 1975. Now that the BBT artist had moved to Los Angeles, and since Rameshwar is managing the BBT, the art department now came under his guidance. He wanted to standardize the style of the BBT paintings so that all of the paintings would have the same style. For his project, he wanted to have the artist redo all of the Krishna book paintings in this new style for the next printing of the Krishna book. So to start with, he had a number of the artists, but not Devahudi Devi Dasi, but the other artists, they all worked together on a new Rasa dance painting. This painting was to set the standard for the new BBT style of art. Rameshwar was so happy with what they had done. So when Srila Prabhupada came, Rameshwar took the painting up to Srila Prabhupada's room, and he decided to do an official unveiling of the painting. He brought the painting up, draped in a cloth. He had an easel brought up, and before he unveiled the painting, he made a presentation to Srila Prabhupada. He explained how this painting was designed to be, it was going to set the new style for the BBT paintings. He explained how so many of the artists had worked together on this painting, and how he planned to replace all of the paintings in the Krishna book with these new paintings in this new style. After building up the great expectations for this painting, he finally unveiled the painting and looked towards Srila Prabhupada, anticipating his beaming smile of approval. Instead, Srila Prabhupada turned up his nose and said, "This is not rasa dance, this is hippie dance." He let Rameshwar know, in no uncertain terms, that he flatly did not approve of this new style, and this new painting in particular. He told Rameshwar, "Do not publish this painting in any of my books." Oops. Well, that was the next part of Rameshwar's presentation, which he had to now go ahead with it, and that was to show Srila Prabhupada the latest volume from the Srimad Bhagavatam that had just come out from the printers, and yes, that painting was in that volume. Srila Prabhupada was not at all happy. He told Rameshwar to immediately order a new printing of that copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam, of that edition, without this painting. So much he detested that new style, and that painting in particular. Then he instructed Rameshwar that he must not remove any of the original Krishna book paintings. He said, "You can add new ones, but do not remove any of the original ones." Srila Prabhupada said, I'm quoting from what Rameshwar had told me when he came out of that meeting. Srila Prabhupada said the original paintings, because Rameshwar had to explain all of this to the artist and what had happened. Anyway, he said that Srila Prabhupada said the original paintings of that Krishna book were painted with pure love and devotion. These new paintings are not. I have the eyes to see, but you do not. So he told that those original paintings were painted with real pure love and devotion. And most of those were painted in 1969. The Krishna book was published in the spring of 1970. And it came back from the printers in the summer of 1970, which is when I got it in the library. But with the exception of Devahudi Devidasi, the artist who worked on that new style painting in 1975, they were the same artists who painted the original Krishna book paintings in 1969. Yet in 1969, Srila Prabhupada considered that their services, their paintings, were done in pure loving devotion back in 1969. And yet 6 years later, those same devotee artists, he considered their later paintings lacked such pure devotion. I know it's a rather long, detailed story. Oh, and there's more I want to share about Devahudi Devidasi and glorification of her pure devotion and why she wasn't part of that new style. But that will have to be in another ancillary note or another video. And when I have that one done, I will put it up and put up the link here so you can click on it. But this long story was to give an example that supports my view that in 1969, when Srila Prabhupada had written those letters, that by 1975, he anticipated all his earlier disciples would become qualified to give initiation. This was due to the fact that in 1969, those early devotees were exhibiting red-hot devotion. But it was due to Srila Prabhupada's close association that they had rapidly exhibited such advanced purity, such that Srila Prabhupada anticipated in just another 6 years, they will all become Mahabhagavats. But in the following years, this changed. In 1968, and before those earlier devotees, they were enjoying that rare direct and close association with the pure devotee. And thus they exhibited a higher level of purity also, like the iron rod that glows just like fire in the association of fire. But once Prabhupada began traveling more and more, and those devotees were no longer in his direct association, their iron of devotion no longer glowed as red hot as it had in 1969. And as long as they stayed on course, they would advance. But it was going take a lot longer. The road was going to be a lot longer journey than just a few years to become fully qualified. That is the purpose of me telling this story, to show how this was the case for the artist, and it was also the case for the earlier devotees who had so much of Srila Prabhupada's close personal association.